college football season is finally over, so I feel it's finally the right time, and I have the time to talk about the first year under Brian Kelly for LSU. It was a year of a lot of expectations, a lot of different things. So let's talk about it, right? Because I think I have a lot to talk about. This is probably a 20-minute video. But anyway, let's talk about LSU right after this intro. Dawson Richard here once again for another LSU video. I know it's been a while. I was gonna do on the Citrus Bowl, but we all know how that went. Good job, LSU, for leaving your season off with a win like that. The other season you were playing wide receiver in your bowl game. So anyway, right? As I'm recording this as the national championship game is going on, in which I can't wait for expansion, mind you. Some more SEC teams are in the playoff, mind you. I just want to, take a moment to think about LSU's first year under Brian Kelly, right? How the expectations of this team changed and everything else like that, right? So let's begin, right? And I think to start with this, you gotta back it up a bit before, Brian Kelly was here, right? Brian Kelly was here, but main point is this, right? Ed Orgeron left after 2 500 seasons. Thing with, Coach O, and basically what led to his firing besides for the 2 500 seasons was the culture that was built wasn't great, right? He was a motivator coach, right? He didn't have a scheme. He didn't have anything, right? He was just a good motivator, and he was just dependent on his coaching hires, and the coaching hires led to 2 disappointing seasons at LSU. You do not go 500 at LSU, all right? We make jokes about Les Miles, but that guy, he always had winning seasons, right? There was a streak of winning seasons. And, you bring in, so you do that, you basically give Scott Woodward the free chance to fire your, butt. Because here's the thing with Scott Woodward, right? He is a guy that wants to go down as probably the second best athletic director in LSU history, probably the first, depending on what Brian Kelly does, right? And he need, what he does and how his coaching hires, go, through, right? With, Moki and, Johnson and McMahon and now Brian Kelly, right? He has a type, when it comes to coaching, right? There's this big name offensive genius, right? I think you can say all his coaching hires all have an offensive background, and say what you want about Woodward and how he's been handling stuff, but he somehow was able to get Brian Kelly to leave Notre Dame, right? Probably one of the easiest jobs in the country when it comes to college football, right? He can have 10-win seasons there, always have a chance in the playoff committee's eyes to be in the playoffs, but you see he could never, get over the hump because of Notre Dame players and all that type of stuff. There's videos all around the offseason about, but the main point is this, right? You bring the winningest coach in college football history to LSU, in which, mind you, 3 coaches, there's a streak of coaches winning national championships here. And I think we can all agree the last 2, Les Miles and Ed Orgeron, aren't on the same level as Brian Kelly, right? Brian Kelly's more up, all that type of stuff, right? So you give him these resources, and he has, what you basically give him after Ed Orgeron and players left was 40 scholarship players, and he had to get to around 80, right? And in his first offseason, right, he kept the main core together of, recruits. Got Harold Perkins to commit to LSU. And, went for the transfer portal and got some players as well. And these players, they all bought into the coaching hires that Brian Kelly made as well. All, you can like link every coach to either some championship team or some contending team, and high school, college, or all different levels of football. All and more importantly, there are a lot of Louisiana guys, right? Part of Brian Kelly's goals in culture building is to keep as many Louisiana players and kids home to graduate as champions at LSU. And with his recruiting class, transfer portal, all that type of stuff, he was successful in the job. And then comes, spring training and all this type of stuff, right? One of the players he gets in the spring, in this transfer portal is Jaden Daniels. And, most people found this interesting because Miles Brennan, he got Miles Brennan to return, get him out of the portal. But then eventually Miles Brennan, quits football, wants to live his life, all that type of stuff. So, anyway, right? He has to figure out what quarterback he wants, and he goes to Jaden Daniels, right? And I'll talk more about that as we go into the actual season of why Jaden Daniels, helped this year out. But through this entire offseason, mind you, the main point is this, right? Most people had LSU as an 8-win team, right? If you punch above your weight, 9 wins, right? Very much a rebuilding year, but you're going to be above 500 somehow, right? And, come week 1, you're in the Superdome against Florida State. You see the work that LSU had to put into it. It was a very sloppy, start of a game. Offensively, you were not running your best offensive line that you were running at the end of the year. Tackling, wasn't there. The adjustments that became a common topic through the season weren't there. And still, somehow, it was only a 1-point game to get into overtime, and your special teams unit, which was your Achilles heel for the entire season, messed up. So in theory, you still had a chance to tie and go to overtime against a team that you had no chance. There was like no possible way to be that close, right? With the way that they played, the 50 other minutes. As the season progressed, right, expectations, it was, hey, rebuilding team, right? But come Alabama, right? Come at the Alabama week, you are somehow in the opportunity and the chance to basically win the SEC West. You wouldn't outright win if you beat Bama, but basically you would because of certain other reasons, right? And with, the improvements and adjustments that were made by beating Mississippi State and all these other teams leading up to Alabama, you gave Alabama a tough competitive game in which Alabama had to have heroic efforts by Bryce Young just to get it to overtime, right? And you still won in overtime because you in a world of matchups, you were the better team that time. And now your expectations, change for LSU during this time, right? You think, hey, maybe with a bit of luck, right? If supposedly Alabama is the only team that can rival Georgia, right? Which is what most people in the media and fans were thinking, right? If Alabama's the only team that can give Georgia a challenge, then hey, maybe we have a chance against Georgia, right? And that's the main thought. And also the other thought was, hey, if we somehow beat Georgia, they're going to let a 2-loss team into the playoffs. Because there's no way a playoff committee will leave the SEC champions out. And, the A&M game happened, right? That was a horrible game, right? I didn't do a review on it, but it was a horrible game. But in theory, right, it gives you, it makes you go back to earth, right? It makes you go back to earth a bit, right? Because it makes you remember what this team is, right? It was a 40 scholarship, team before Brian Kelly got here. And somehow through the, development of a culture and an offense and a defense, you thought, hey, if we keep this Cinderella run up, the SEC championship game will actually mean something besides just ruining Georgia's perfect record. And it took Tech it took Texas A&M, mind you, right, to finally figure out, hey, we got all these 5-star players in the offseason, and we're not using them properly, right? And it took them till this LSU game to finally use them properly. And the Georgia game happened, and we all know how it goes, right? But just think for a second, right? If you were to tell a person after the Florida State game that, hey, you're going to be SEC West champions with 10 wins, they will call you crazy, right? There was, with how the rest of the division looked, somehow becoming SEC West champions and 10 wins was just crazy talk, right? And I think mostly why LSU was in an opportunity to win these 10 wins are a lot of different reasons. And I think one of them was, in most cases, right, LSU was not outcoached, right, in these games, right? With adjustments on offense and defense, LSU won some games that in the first half didn't even seem like a chance to win them. So credit to Denbrock, House, and Kelly for making these adjustments, and more importantly to the players for executing these adjustments, right? And sometimes the players couldn't execute the adjustments. We saw that, right, in the losses that this team had. And sometimes you just outclass, player-wise, right? There's nothing a coach can do about that, right? But most of the time this year, the players executed the adjustments that the coaches made. And let's talk about offensively, right? Probably one of the most, polarizing, topics of discussion is Jaden Daniels' quarterback play. And I'm going to say this, right? His play is, frustrating and all that type of stuff. But I'll say this, right? Let me phrase this right. His play kind of won you some games, all right? Being the center of the offense kind of helped you out in some of these games, right? Because, whatever you want to say about Garrett Nussmeier, right? You may think Garrett Nussmeier is the better pocket passer. And I could agree with you on some of those points of Nussmeier being the better passer and all that type of stuff. Guy has a cannon of an arm and is looking for the explosive play all the time. But just looking for the explosive play leads you to having very much interceptions, right? And Garrett Nussmeier is an interception machine currently, right? And some may say, well, if you give him more snaps, he wouldn't be this way and all that type of. And you know what? That is perfectly fine, right? I am also covering the San Francisco 49ers. I know all about, hey, if you give a raw talent snaps, they will look better as the year goes on, right? But the thing was, right, I think with LSU, right, and Brian Kelly in general, right, it was more about trying to, I will say, it was to fast forward your development, all right? Of both your offensive scheme, your offensive players, all that type of stuff, right? And, with his play, I think, as the play went on through the year, it got better because he trusted his wide receivers, mostly, Jenkins, and, and Mason Taylor and all these weapons and all that type of stuff. But more importantly, his offensive line got better for the season, right? And the offensive line was led by 2 true freshman tackles, right? The only team in the SEC that, last season that did that, right? And they were pretty good, right? And, starting 2 true freshmen shows more why, in theory, why Jaden Daniels was the starter. And that was, if you give the best opportunity to win a game, you are in the driver's seat, right? You are going to be the starter, right? Wire went to the bench to start a true freshman, and it worked out for him. And this, the play as I'm talking about with Jane Daniels, it probably won you the Auburn game because of how safe he is with the ball, right? If Nussmeier's playing now, you're going to lead to an interception and a heavily defensive game, and you may, points could be scoring that, right? And you can probably point to a few more games, but I'm just using the Auburn game for example, right? In which you need safe quarterback play to figure stuff out, right? And defensively, right? Harold Perkins became a star this year, right? Perk 40, all that type of stuff, right? It was very interesting to see how that Brian Kelly in his first year in the SEC was able to flip a commitment like Harold Perkins to LSU, and you got 2 more years of that. And just all around how this stuff, I will say this, right? I will say more with the defense, it was more scraps, right? A lot of transfers in the secondary that both killed you in some times and then in others because of the experience that was on that side of the ball. But more importantly, the defense, as I said before, they executed the adjustments needed to win games, and they're just going to get better with more experience and some, more younger players get into starting roles. Let's see, how long is this video going here? Like 16 minutes. So really, if you want to talk about, the year 1 review of Brian Kelly, right? He exceeded expectations, right? He let, as I stated before, right? Wide receiver was playing quarterback in a bowl game before he came here, right? And he led this team to 10 wins, SEC West champions, and just, built on that, right? Showed what, through the season, you saw glimpses of what this team will look consistently through the years that Brian Kelly is here, and hopefully that leads to a national championship. I honestly don't believe LSU, they're going to be a contender next year, right? Jane Daniels is back, right? And you're bringing back your entire offensive line and some of your weapons, right? So it's just going to be it's interesting, right? Brian Kelly comes in, builds this team with a box of scraps, leads it to 10 wins and to the SEC championship game. And your expectations as a fan change, right? Were you mad? Let's just say it like this, right? You were a team that was just 6-7, and you were mad that you couldn't get into the playoffs, when all you should have been glad was you were an above 500 team and that you showed promise, right? So just a very good coaching job. If you were to give a letter grade, it's an A+, right? You could say it's an A- due to the losses, but hey, I said this team was gonna win 8 freaking games. Wait, no, I didn't say that, right? Well, maybe I did say that once, alright? But basically what I said in my schedule prediction, and winning didn't matter this year. It was just about being a better football team every week. And in my opinion, the team that played Florida State was not the same team that was in the SEC championship, that earned their SEC championship opportunity against Georgia. And honestly, that's all you can hope for in the year 1 rebuild, especially in the SEC. But dang, this was a long video, a long talking point for me. I originally had a script for this video, but I said screw it, let's just freestyle my thoughts out. So sorry if it was a bit jumbled and messy, but anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this LSU video. We have an off season, we got some talking to do. Maybe we get back into LSU basketball, or we start with baseball this year. Maybe I flip baseball and basketball every single year. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoy this video. I'm at 220 subscribers. I am 5 away from my goal of 225. Hope you guys help me get there. And more content's on the way. LSU and 49ers content. More 49ers content this week. I know I gotta make some Seahawks videos. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you guys next time.